Hello and welcome back to Bookmark Chronicles. Today I'm here to review the Burnt Empire Saga by Ashoke Banker. I've talked about the series a lot lately because I really enjoyed the first book. I'm going to review the entire series here. If you have read parts of the series and not others, I will give you a spoiler alert every time I go into spoilers for each book. So if you've read the first one, you can watch all the way through to the beginning of the second book before I give you a spoiler warning. To give you an idea of how this is going to go, I rated the first book 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. Rated the second book 4.75 stars, and I rated the third book 2 stars. So not a happy ending, but there are reasons for that. Apparently this book was supposed to be a lot longer and for whatever reason had to be cut down. So I definitely feel like you could tell when we got to the third book, but I'll get to all of that a little later. As far as what the series is about, in the first book we are following 2 young princes, Audrey and Shvete. The emperor has recently died, and so they're trying to decide who will rule next. Audrey and Shvete at this time are very young, but they are put to the test of fire, in which they are literally sat upon a burning throne. If they survive, that means that they are worthy of ruling the empire. Both of them pass, so it's decided that they will rule together. However, a woman comes forward and claims that her child, who is older than both of the princes, is also worthy. This child also passed the test of fire, and chaos ensues from there. That's really all that you need to know going into the story. But when I tell you that this series had me on the edge of my seat, it really did. I loved the first book so much. So the synopsis I gave is for Upon a Burning Throne, and this is a pretty chunky book. All of the books in this series are, so if you're not someone who wants to go through huge tomes, it might not be for you, but I absolutely loved it. This was on my best of 2021, and I was so excited to continue the series. Now, I will say that if you're the kind of person who does not like a lot of perspectives in your fantasy, this probably won't be for you. We are essentially following each character in the royal family, and there's like 14 of them. However, if you don't mind multiple perspectives, a pretty chunky book, and you like when your fantasy has messy political drama in it, then this one's for you. Because when I tell you that shit hit the fan halfway through the prologue, I mean, it happened like 3 pages in and it just carried through the rest of the book. So even though I did not enjoy the ending to this trilogy, I will still promote this book. I still think that more people need to read it and that it deserves so much more hype. In addition to multiple perspectives and it being a tome, I would also recommend looking up content warnings for this book. I'll put some on the screen, but there are probably some that I missed. So if you're thinking about whether or not you want to read it, think in terms of the Poppy War and how it's pretty bloody and very gory. A lot of that takes place in this book as well, so keep that in mind. So that really is all the information that you need to go into the series. If you have not yet read Upon a Burning Throne but would like to, this is your official spoiler warning. Quick rundown of characters that we follow. First, we have Wrath, who is the son of the former emperor. He is Jelana's stepson. He is the prince regent when Audrey and Shvete are born, and his mother is actually a goddess, but he and Jelana have a pretty great relationship, and they rule the empire together until Audrey and Shvete are of age. Jelana is the dowager empress. She is the widow of the former emperor, as I said. So Wrath's stepmother, Vessa's mother, and grandmother to the heirs to the throne in the first book. Vessa is Jelana's first son. He is a seer mage. He can walk through portals. He lives in like the forest or some shit. He is also the biological father of Audrey, Shvete, and Vita. Vita isn't really introduced until the second half of the book. He is one of Vessa's sons that he had with one of the maids. Audrey and Shvete's mothers, Ember and Umber, don't really pay attention to them. They don't raise or spend time with their sons at all, so they're briefly mentioned, but they're really not invested. Hi, Editing Ray. I realized that I never explained that and people are probably going to be confused. The reason that Ember and Umber are not invested in Audrey and Shvete's lives are because they did not want them. Both of their husbands were killed, and with the emperor also dying, it left the throne without an heir. So Wrath is acting as prince regent until they have an heir. So Jelana told Vessa to go impregnate them, hoping that one of them would produce an heir. They ended up both having an heir. At one point they had tried to convince him to get with the maid instead, which is how Vita came to be, but that's why Ember and Umber are not in their lives. As I mentioned, Audrey is one of the crown princes. He is blind, ends up marrying Geldry, and ends up taking a mistress, Savali. Shvate is the other crown prince. He is albino and ends up marrying Carney and Mela, and is the father to the 5. Audrey is thought to be the father of the 100, of the Crucian 100. So they're often referred to as the Crucian 5 and the Crucian 100, or the sons of Audrey and children of Shvate. So I hope that's helpful moving forward. Like I said, shit got real halfway through the prologue. After the boys pass the testifier and this woman comes forward, that woman, her name is Akreen. She is the princess in a different country. But she comes forward and says, my child is also worthy of a burning throne. She has Crucian blood. So Crucians are the family that rule the empire. And the reason that Crucians are special is because they have a connection to Stonefire, which is what the throne is made out of. So if someone tried to attack the ruling emperor, Stonefire would attack them and shoot fire at them. And the fire that comes from it doesn't affect anyone of Crucian blood. So when Akreen comes forward with her daughter Cruciata, she passes the testifier as well. However, the royal family denies her claim to the throne. So Audrey and Shvate are the 2 princes that I mentioned before. There's a lot of ableism surrounding the 2 of them because people are like, well, how can a blind king rule our empire? Or how can an albino king rule the empire? And blah, blah, blah. So they're just like, okay, they'll just rule together because they're stronger together than they are separate. When Akreen steps forward and presents Cruciata, Jelana is like, how is your daughter Crucian? Who is her father? And Akreen's like, it's not important. She passed the test. She has a right to the throne. And Jelana is like, no, bitch, I don't know you. You're just a whore. So then Akreen's father steps forward and was like, bitch, you're not gonna talk to my daughter like that. Let's not forget that you had your firstborn by your father-in-law. It was a whole mess. When I tell you that reading the prologue is like watching reality TV, it was that messy. I'm giving you the Cliff's Notes version because I don't have time to get into all that, but it was a hot mess. Finally, Akreen's husband steps forward and it's Jarson. So Jarson is the brother of the former emperor, and he was exiled because he tried to kill his brother. Well, he tried to kill a lot of people, but Jarson is also partially a demon. He's not human, he's a demon. When I picture Jarson, I think of like, you know, in Snow White, when the evil queen disguises herself as an old woman and gives her the apple, that mixed with like Slender Man, like, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I picture him. Anyway, with him being exiled, he no longer has a claim to the throne, and therefore Cruciata does not have a claim to the throne. Jarson's a bitch, so he gets mad at that and declares war on the burnt empire, and everybody's just like, yeah, okay, whatever. So Cruciata, we don't see her for the rest of this book. She comes back in book 2, so I'll talk about that when it's time for that. When Audrey and Shvate are still children, we see them in their first battle because Jarson does try to attack. He recruits people from other kingdoms and encourages them to fight against the burnt empire. Because of Crucian law, there are a lot of rules that they have to abide by, but the boys have to be on the field during the battle. But because they are still children, nobody is supposed to attack them. Jarson convinces everybody to attack them directly, and all fucking hell breaks loose. And it's funny because they're like 7 and 8 at the time, maybe, and they actually kicked ass during this battle. It was kind of funny. So that's a little glimpse of their childhood, and then we see them grow up. Shvate ends up having 2 wives. One of them is Carney, who has a child that no one knows about. She had the child when she was young, and what essentially happened was that she was seduced by a stone god. It was really weird, to be honest, because there was a person that she wanted to marry, but because she wasn't ready for marriage at the time, he's like, okay, well, I have to go and compete in other wedding contests. Like, I can't just do nothing. And she's like, oh yeah, okay, whatever. So then this guru comes to her father's palace, and for whatever reason she has to wait on him, so he sends her on this journey knowing she's going to see the death of the guy that she loves. And so she goes, and when she comes back, she's very distant, nobody knows why. And right before the guru leaves, he gives her a mantra, and the mantra essentially summons a stone god, who then comes to her under the disguise of the guy she loves, and he's like, I'm here to give you the child that you would have conceived on your wedding night. It was really weird because it was like, well, if you knew that was gonna happen, why didn't you just tell her instead of making her witness this, because now she's fucking traumatized. Anywho, she gives that baby up because she's like 16, 17 at the time. She's like, I can't do this. And then that kid doesn't really come back until later. Anyway, so yeah, that happened. And then the other wife is Mela, and it turns out that Mela is the sister of the guy that Carney was in love with and whose child she had. Nobody knows that. And Mela never finds out, which is interesting, but there's that. Shvait and Mela were drunk in the woods one day and they went hunting and they accidentally killed a guru and his wife, thinking that they were deer. Well, they were deer. Never mind. It's not important. But he curses Shvait and says that the next time you live with your wife, you're gonna die, basically. So Shvait abdicates the throne and he, Mela, and Carney go into self-exile. So they're just frolicking in the forest, right? Carney remembers the mantra and calls upon a stone god again. So she ends up having 3 children that are demigods, and Mela has twins that are also demigods. Those children will be referred to as the 5 moving forward. Now, on the other hand, while Shvait is in self-exile, Audrey is still at the palace, right? He takes a wife, her name is Geldry. She's a bitch. She pretends that she really loves Audrey and wears a blindfold because she's like, well, if my husband can't see, I don't want to see either. But she's actually a scheming little bitch. Like, her and her brother are plotting. And then one night, while Audrey believes that he is sleeping with his wife, he's not. And while Geldry believes that she is sleeping with Audrey, she's not. Geldry ended up in a maid's bedchamber somehow, and he actually ends up falling in love with her. Geldry was seduced by Jarson, and both of these women are now impregnated. So the maid that Audrey slept with, her name is Sovali, and he actually really loves her, and she's pregnant, and he's so excited about this child. But Geldry's also pregnant, and he's confused because he doesn't really know what happened there, but he doesn't say anything about it. He's just like, oh, okay. Geldry ends up having 100 kids somehow. Some ritual that Vesa performed way back when, and 100 kids. There it is. At some point, Audrey is alone, and because he's blind, he believes that he's speaking to his brother Vita, who comes and tells him Savali and his unborn child have been kidnapped and murdered, and that it was Geldry who orchestrated it along with Carney. And I was like, how did Carney orchestrate this when Carney's in the forest? But whatever. Audrey's pissed. Like, he's ready to kill everyone. And then we change scenes again. We're in the forest with Shvait, Mela, and Carney. And while the reader knows that it's actually Jarson, it appears to everyone else that Vesa, his father, has appeared and kills him. And that's just how it ends. Like, it just ends with Shvait being murdered in the woods. Now, moving on to book 2, I do still have it, but I'm probably not going to keep it. A Dark Queen Rises. This is a parallel timeline to Upon a Burning Throne. In this one, we are seeing all the events that are taking place outside of the palace. So we follow Krushta as she grows up, as well as see a little bit more from a few of the other kingdoms. And then all of the storylines converge in book 3. That's pretty much all you need to know about this one. So if you've not yet read A Dark Queen Rises but would like to, this is your official spoiler warning. So there are new characters in this one. We have Krushita, who also goes by Krush or Krushni. Keep that in mind. I really like Krush. I think she's super cute and just a really great person. She's so young in this one, but she has an understanding of certain things. So I really liked her as a character. We have her mother, Akreen, again, who we saw at the beginning of Upon a Burning Throne, but then that was it. Another character we have is Drisha, who is Krishna's brother, and I will explain that in a minute. Bulan, who is Avanjani, and they are like, they're very large, but they are essentially 2 bodies as one. I don't know how to explain them. I feel like they would be like a character in like Mortal Kombat or something. They're really great people. We see one in this one and then another in the 3rd book, and both of them are just really cute. I mean, like, not like cute, like puppy cute, but like really nice. So I really like them. Then we have Vasudeva, who is Carney's brother. Tarak, who is, he's a prince from a different country. And Ladislu, who is an assassin. Yeah, a lot of new characters, and I'll explain all of their roles shortly. This book, in the prologue, it starts off with talking about the given avatars. The given avatars are reincarnations of stone gods, essentially, and one of them is Krushni and the other is Drisha. So when I say that Krushta and Drisha are siblings, you'll see why later. So it turns out that after our first introduction to Akreen and Krushta, Akreen left Jarson and fled because he's power hungry and is trying to just use their child to gain access to the Burning Throne. And she's like, I don't want that for her. I want her to be a happy, normal child. So she runs away. She's on her way to visit her sister to try to find refuge there. However, Jarson is following them and keeps attacking them periodically. At this point, Krushta is 7 and has somehow figured out how to work portals using her power as a member of the Krushan bloodline. She also has the ability to see inside the mind of other people and animals, which was an interesting power to explore, and that helps aid her in battles. When she starts exploring portals, Vesa comes to her a few times and aids her and teaches her how to use the portals, and he has a suspicion that she is a reincarnation of the stone god Krush. And he tells her of a prophecy in which someone is known as the Dark Queen, and he has an idea that it might be her. Vesa is also helping Tarak, who is a prince. I don't remember what kingdom he's from, but he's a tyrant. His soldiers are terrible. They go around terrorizing people in smaller villages for literally no reason other than it makes them feel powerful. So there's an idea of how much I dislike Tarak. And my only complaint with this book was that we spent so much time with Tarak and it felt absolutely pointless. He feels like a privileged frat boy who literally throws a temper tantrum anytime that he doesn't get his way or someone tells him no. Tarak has a sister who is married to Ventura, Carney's brother, and there's another prophecy that states that her 8th child is known as the Slayer, and he will be the one to end Tarak. So every time his sister has a baby, he literally forces them to bring them the child, and he kills it in a very brutal way. That 8th child is Drisha, but they were actually able to get him away and basically give him to adoptive parents, so that Tarak doesn't know where he is, and it ends up saving his life. So eventually he meets Ladislu, who is an assassin from this very powerful tribe of women warriors, and she has a goal that Tarak knows nothing about, but then Vesa tells him, like, oh, well, she wants to kill Jarson, and Tarak wants to kill Jarson also because he feels that because Jarson has declared himself as, like, God Emperor or something, that he doesn't like that his title is bigger than his. And it's basically a pissing contest, and it's fucking stupid. Like, Tarak's an idiot. I literally hate this character so much, and I don't understand why we had to spend so much time with him. But anyway, Tarak has this weird ability where he can, like, increase in size and weight, and it's just weird, honestly. There's a lot of weird things that go into it, so I'm not gonna get into all of that. Tarak actually ends up falling for her, but when he finally goes to face the Slayer, Drisha, he's feeling confident. He thinks he's got this. Drisha is maybe a teenager at this point, so he doesn't think that he's really a threat. When Drisha goes to attack Tarak, he looks over and sees Ladislu laughing with Jarson, and that's right before he dies. So that was my biggest complaint, because I didn't like Tarak as a character, and I don't feel like we should have spent all that time with him just for him to die. Because what was the point? To me, it didn't feel like there was a point, so I just didn't really care for any of that. Then we pop back over to Krush and Akreen, and Jarson they're like zombies, basically. He's sending this zombie army to attack them, and they're trying to fight back, but they just keep coming, and they don't really know what to do. So Jarson reaches out to Krush via the portals, and it's like, I'll make all of this stop if you just let me come talk to you and your mom. And I felt like it was so naive, but she did it. And Jarson ends up killing her mom right in front of her. Naturally, Krushta is filled with rage, and the stone fire from the burnt empire can feel her rage and is chanting burn. And Krushta's like, yeah, burn. And that's like where it ends. Like, Krushta's mad, Stonefire's mad with her, and you can just feel that shit's about to get fucked up, you know what I mean? Like, you know something's coming, right? So that's what I felt at the end of A Dark Queen Rises. It didn't exactly happen like that, but Vesta tells her what she needs to do in order to get her revenge, and that's where it ends. So, going into book 3, The Blind King's Wrath, like I said, I didn't enjoy this as much as I had hoped. I just feel that with the author not being able to do what he wanted to do for the series and have all of the books, this was apparently supposed to be like a 9-book series, with that not being possible, you can just really tell because there's a lot of pacing things in the 3rd book, as well as the beginning was kind of slow for me and a little annoying. But I also know that there were new characters that we needed to be introduced to and everything. I don't really fault the author for this. So even though I didn't love it, like I said, I do still really enjoy the series in general. And so if you have not yet read The Blind King's Wrath but would like to, this is your official spoiler warning. Book 3 picks up right where book 1 left off, and we're seeing the aftermath of Shvate's murder. Mind you, his 2 wives and his children are there, and the 5 are still very young at this point. Mela is completely distraught, and while Carney is trying to talk her off the ledge and say, okay, we need to be strong for the children, think of the children, Mela throws herself on Shvate's funeral pyre, and Carney has to raise the 5 on her own. Vessa goes to tell Wrath everything that he knows. He knows that Jarson pretended to be him when he killed Shvate. So now Shvate is dead, Mela is dead. Carney and the 5 are not returning to the Burnt Empire because they don't trust anybody. And Vesta tells Jelena and Wrath that Krushita, after her mother was killed, she took her own life to avoid being used by Jarson to claim the throne. But Krushita was a given avatar and the reincarnation of the stone god Krush, so she will come back to life in a different avatar. We'll get to that later. After killing Shvate, Jarson goes to visit Audrey and is putting a bunch of things in his head, isolating him from the rest of the family. So Audrey ends up believing pretty much anything that Jarson tells him, despite the fact that he knows how his family feels about Jarson and why. So that was kind of frustrating. I didn't really understand why Audrey would all of a sudden believe this person who he knows has a vendetta against his entire family, but he does. Jarson also takes advantage of Audrey's blindness and will sometimes come to him disguised as other people using their voices, and Audrey can never tell the difference. Eventually we have a time jump and the 5 are all grown up. So the 5 are Yudi, Broom, Arrow, Saha, and Kula. I can't really remember all of the stone gods that parented them, so I can't help you there. You'll just have to read it because I don't know how to explain it. So we see the 5 grown up. We also see the 100 grown up. Geldry's children. I was gonna say Geldry and Audrey's, but they're not Audrey's children. So, the 100 are gross. They remind me a lot of Tarak. They're tyrants. They're disgusting, and I hate all of them. They also have a guru, Dronus, who is another villain with a god complex, a lot like Tarak. I don't like villains with god complexes. It's fucking annoying. We'll get to all that later. Another thing that I thought was weird about this one is that there's no sign of Geldry at all. We don't know anything about where she is or what happened to her, or she's just not here. Again, I think that's a byproduct of just not having enough time, but she's just not going to appear in this one, just so you know. So while I was reading this, I noted that it finally got interesting around like 49%, which to me is a very long time to go into a book and not feel intrigued or interested by the things that are going on, which is another thing that played into me giving this such a low rating. I also didn't really care about a lot of the major players in this book. It just didn't matter to me. So then we follow Carney, who again is a given avatar, a reincarnation of Krush. Carney is now the princess of Guanland. So her parents in this one are Guan and Vensera, I think was her name. Carney hosts a wedding contest to get everyone to Guanland to do what she needs to do. Shvate's 5, as well as Jarson, is invited. Lattisloo is with him. Dronus comes with the 100, and basically all of the major players that she needs, she gets to one place with this wedding contest. I'm not going to go into the details of the contest because that doesn't matter, but During the contest, she says something that insults someone, I think Dronus, and they prepare for battle. So Jarson eventually steps up to her and says, you could have had the entire burnt empire, realizing that it's the reincarnation of Krushta. And she's like, I never wanted that. This is what I want. I want revenge from my mother. So basically what ends up happening is that there is a battle, which I felt took a really long time to get to, but with the help of Vladislav, who was acting as a spy but pretending to be on Jarson's side, she tells Krushni that what you need to do is that because Jarson is not human, he is actually two beings fused into one. You need to separate the halves and then you can kill him that way. So essentially what ends up happening is that Carney and Vesa pull the halves apart and send each through a separate portal so that they're separated forever. It was just, and that's, I mean, that in and of itself was also kind of weird because it didn't really explain like why that was the only way to defeat Jarson. It also turns out that Savali was not murdered. She and her son survived, and so they come back. That wasn't explored much either. They appear right before the battle when they're talking about their plans, and then they end up sent through a portal to be with Audrey, and that's like it. So yeah, it didn't feel like the ending had been wrapped up, and I think maybe an epilogue would have helped with that because Audrey says something about making Savali Empress and his son will now be the heir to the throne because Jarson admits that the 100 were not Audrey's children, they were his, which is all fine and good, and you know, we kind of know that from the events of the first book already, but there was no further explanation of that. It was just like, yep, so that's how it ends and bye. And he also says to Carney, I believe Jarson when he said that you were in on all of this and that's not true, so I'd like you to be my advisor. And he calls her Queen Carney, and we don't see any of that. So then also with the wedding contest, technically the 5 won, and so Carney, or so Krushni is like, yeah, I'm gonna marry all 5 of them. And I'm like, huh? This doesn't make any sense. And I know that she's no longer Krushta, but technically those are your cousins. It was just really weird, and it felt discombobulated and not like a cohesive ending. And Ladislaw was originally sent to murder Jarson, but she doesn't, but she helps. But then I don't know what happens with her in the end either. So a lot of it just felt incomplete, and I feel like all of that is because of the series being shortened. I would not recommend this last book. I think with all of the pacing and how slow the beginning is and not getting the battle until 80% and an incomplete ending, I don't think many people would like it, but I will still absolutely recommend Upon a Burning Throne. I still love that book and I will probably reread it at some point. I just think that this series overall would have been much better if the author had been able to do as he intended. So those are all of my feelings on the Burnt Empire saga. If you made it all the way to the end, thanks. I know a lot of people don't know about this series, and then to have another disappointing ending for me, I don't know how motivated people will be to finish, but that's it for me today. Let me know if you have read this book or if it's on your TBR. Otherwise, that's all I have for you, and I'll see you in the next video.